Hey there, Zion family. It's been a little while since I've sent out one of these update videos, and to be honest, I was trying to think through what might I be able to do to connect and help us to be growing in our understanding of who Jesus is when it's just a short little video to talk with you. You'll notice I'm sitting here in front of a bookshelf. This is a bookshelf in what we're starting to call our church study, our church library. And there's always been some books in this room, but we've got some new ones. And so I thought it'd be neat to talk with you a little bit about some of the books that have really impacted me throughout my life as I read, as I try to understand more of who God is. Many of you know I like to read. Colleen jokes about how when I'm brushing my teeth, I've got a book in my hand and I'm reading, and whenever I have a spare moment, I'm reading something, whether it's a fantasy novel or a theological book or something that just engages my interest. And I always try to piece together, what does this book tell us about who God is, about what he's up to in this world? And one of the books that I read in this last year or so is a book called With. It's written by Skye Jethani. Skye is a pastor and a theologian, and he kind of talks through some of the different postures that we have in how we relate to God. So he talks about the idea of life under God, and life under God is when we recognize that there are a lot of things that are outside of our control, outside of our understanding. But we still believe that our actions impact the world around us. And we get this idea that if we live according to God's expectations, then he will have to bless us. He will have to answer our prayers. And so life under God is where we're actually trying to exert some sort of control over God. We say to God, hey, I'm following all your guidelines, all your rules, all your morality. And so because I'm doing that, in exchange, you have to bless me. So that's life under God. Life over God is where we put ourselves in control. We believe in God, but we see him as this God who's created the universe and then kind of stepped back and just lets everything operate under principles of natural law and science. The world is kind of seen as a machine, and we basically look to the Bible as a guidebook for principles for life, instead of a way of getting to know God better. Instead of strengthening our relationship with him, we search the Bible for these principles so that we can control our world and our life. And life over God reduces the Bible from God's revelation about who he is to a series of divine principles for life. And if you implement these principles, then life will be good. Instead of looking for a relationship with Jesus, we pursue things like 5 steps to a godly marriage or the biblical laws of leadership. But guess what? Discovering these principles does not require that you actually have a relationship with Jesus. Instead, you're putting yourself in control. You're putting yourself over God. And success ends up being effectiveness instead of about faithfulness to Jesus. The third posture is life from God. And in this view, life from God, we think of him as our divine butler, our cosmic therapist. He exists to help us through our problems, to help us achieve our goals. And instead of focusing on glorifying God, instead of learning obedience and serving others, we focus on our own happiness. And in this posture, God himself doesn't have any inherent value. You're not getting to know God because he's God. You're getting to know God because of what he can give you and how he can bless you. He's only valuable if he provides you with what you want. And Christianity just becomes another means to an end. It might look good. It might look spiritual. But ultimately, life from God is about getting what I want, not about honoring Jesus. The next posture is life for God. And this is the idea where we live our lives for God by accomplishing his mission, however we end up defining that mission. We view ourselves based on what we've been able to accomplish for God. And this posture, I think, is really deceiving because there's so many Bible texts and stories and characters that are celebrated because of how they lived their lives in service for God. But underneath that life of service for God was a deep desire to know God, to know Jesus better. The Apostle Paul is a great example of this. Yeah, he served God and he did lots of things for God, but ultimately what he wanted to do was know Jesus better. A life for God is one where you end up putting the mission of God, again, however we define that, ahead of God himself. So what is the posture that Skye writes of in this book that we should pursue? Well, instead of life under God or life over God or life from God or life for God, we should focus on living life with God. The reality of Jesus means that we can relate to God in a totally different way. Life with God is based on the understanding that relationship is at the core of this world, that God exists as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in eternal relationship. And that through Jesus, we can enter into that relationship with God. Jesus came to be with us. The goal of life with God is God. He becomes our treasure. He becomes our goal. We're invited to experience life with God now, and we can communicate and we can commune with Him. Now, I know this is a big picture view of a book, but I wanted to share these thoughts with you. It's made a real difference in my life, and even in how I pray. Instead of saying, God, help me to serve you today, I've been praying, God, help me to be aware of your presence in my life today. Help me to live life with Jesus. And so I hope you can learn to live life with Jesus a little bit more. I'll share the info about where you can get this book in the email that I'm sending out. And then I'd encourage you, there's lots of other books in our library. If you want to stop by the church and borrow a book, just let me know. We'll arrange a time. You can come and borrow some books that will help you grow closer to Jesus, help you to live life with Him. Have a great week.